Alright, so this will be my third video on my ascendant series. This one will be The Secret of Gemini Ascendants. I'm looking real rough. I need a fucking haircut, but who gives a fuck about appearances when I'm out here sharing gems and knowledge with you? So, without further ado, let's get this shit over with. So, what is something that Gemini Ascendant, what is something that's real prominent just by being a Gemini Ascendant in general? Let's think about what does all of the nakshatras in Gemini have in common. All of the nakshatras in Gemini have a theme of like either medicine or prominent like parental and like children issues. And I'll explain. If we go and look at Migrashira, who is the deity of Migrashira? The deity of Migrashira is Chandra, the moon deity, the moon spirit. And if you know, which you should know, if you had a decent knowledge on nakshatras, you would know that Chandra had an affair with Jupiter's wife, Tara, and they ended up creating the offspring, the child, Mercury, aka Buddha. And, not to my knowledge, it wasn't like Chandra was active or present in Mercury's life. So you see that little weird disconnect there between parent and child when it comes to Migrashira. And if you jump to Ardra Nakshatra, the deity of that is Rudra, who is basically like a different form of Shiva. And when you look up the lore and the info and details on Rudra, you would see that Rudra, you know, like shot off the head of Brahma, his father, his creator, and all that good stuff. They didn't get along. And then, if you just view Rudra as an incarnation of Shiva, well then, we know that Shiva initially fought Ganesha, who is his son. And he ends up fighting Ganesha before, you know, he realizes like, oh shit, my wife Parvati created this child to guard her while she's bathing. And then Kartikeya, there was a race that Kartikeya, who was the son of Shiva, and there was a race between Kartikeya and Ganesha. They had to race around the world, and whoever, you know, raced around the world and made it to the parents first, they would win this prize. And Kartikeya takes off racing on his peacock or whatever is his form of transportation, and Ganesha instead just walks around in a circle around his parents, and he ends up winning the bet. He ends up winning the bet because he says that, well, Shiva and Parvati, they're like the sun and the moon. They are the world. They like physical embodiments of the universe, of our existence. And with that logic, they was like, wow, this kid is right. So they gave whatever prize that they was racing for to Ganesha. And when Kartikeya came back and found out that his brother ended up winning the bet, he feels cheated because, like, dude, I raced around the whole world and he's going to give it to him for just walking around a circle around y'all, and he ends up leaving home. So from that perspective, you yet again see like a dysfunction between parent and child. And then if you go and jump to Purnyavasu, the deity of that nakshatra is Aditi. Yeah, Aditi, the mother goddess. And if my memory serves right, there is a tale of how Mercury ends up cursing Aditi because she was pregnant, and I guess she took too long to answer the door to go and greet or whatever Mercury, and he grew impatient and ends up cursing the woman to have her kid die, to miscarry. That way she wouldn't be so burdened with kids and spend more time with the friends or whatever. And her husband ends up reviving and bringing the dead fetus back to life and shit. But with that, you see that dysfunction again with children and whatnot. And I also told you that this sign of Gemini in general has like a karma with like medicine or diseases. So let's start with Migrashira again. If you go and look at Migrashira, you will see that Chandra, he was cursed by Daksha because Chandra, he wasn't spending time with all of Daksha's daughters or whatever. He was just spending time with one, and they grew jealous, and Daksha warned him, and Chandra didn't listen, so he ends up getting cursed to die. And so Chandra, the moon deity, ends up praying to Shiva to help save him and heal him to overcome this death, this curse. And one thing that I have found interesting when it comes to like these Vedic tales is that it seems that hexes and curses, they cannot be reversed, but they can only be modified. So what Shiva ends up doing is making it so that even though the moon will die, that it will revive and be reborn every time. And that's sort of like the mythological reason why the moon goes through phases, why it waxes and wanes, why it gets dark and gets bright. It's because of the curse that Daksha put on him, and because of Shiva altering the curse so that the moon will come back from its death. The moon sort of dies in the real world. It goes into the new moon phase where it becomes real dark. And then it goes from new moon to full moon, then from full moon to new moon, and just vice versa. So you see that theme of medicine, because Shiva saved and healed Chandra. And move on to Ardra. Rudra is considered to be one of like the best or finest healers, I believe, in like Vedic texts. And like I said, Rudra is basically like an incarnation and form of Shiva. So yet again, we see that great healing nature in Ardra and in Mrigashira, which both fall in Gemini sign. And then if you go to Punyarvasu, we see that Aditi's husband ends up reviving her dead, fetus, bringing back the baby back to life. So you see that theme of saving people from like the brink of death, or you being saved from the brink of death. You can either be Rudra the healer, or you could be like either Rudra the healer or the husband of Aditi, whose name is Kashapya. I probably fucked up the name, who revived her dead baby. So you can either be the healer like them, or you can be the victim. You can be Chandra. You can be Aditi. You could be the one who will suffer a serious affliction. Now that's the nakshatra perspective. Let's actually get into the birth chart perspective of why I said that. If you go and look at, you're a Gemini ascendant. Who is your ascendant lord? It's Mercury. What houses does Mercury rule for a Gemini ascendant? The ascendant, of course, and Mercury rules the 4th house. There we go. But before I even get to that, because I sort of fucked up, I shouldn't have led with that. Look at the 6th house. The 6th house for Gemini ascendant is Scorpio. So let's start there. What does the 6th house represent? The 6th house represents debts and bills and diseases, pets and animals, servants or slaves, being a service to people, routine everyday things. Scorpio originally rules the 8th house of death and transformation and sex and all that stuff. Scorpio is co-ruled by Ketu, and Scorpio is just a very heavy karmic sign. So and the 6th house is also known as a house of prarabdha karma, which means a karma that you cannot avoid, a karma that you must face, a debt that you must face and deal with in this lifetime. So we see that there is super heavy karma within the 6th house for a Gemini ascendant person. And like I said, with the 6th house being diseases and health and all that stuff, and Scorpio being transformation and trauma, we see that you yourself can face and deal with a lot of trauma when it comes to maybe your health. When it comes to like your health or whatever, you could face and deal with like a lot of trauma maybe. When it comes to small pets and animals, you might face and deal with a lot of trauma, or you might have like a heavy karma or debt to animals maybe. But because I just told you about the similarities of all of the nakshatras that fall within Gemini, I would say that a Gemini ascendant person will at one point either have to face and deal with a serious disease, or they will help heal somebody, help them through their serious disease or affliction. It'll be one of the two, but that's what I see and believe for the Gemini ascendant person. And then if you look at, like I said, Mercury is their ascendant lord, and Mercury rules the fourth house. I was telling you how there's difficult karma with the parent, and all you gotta do is look at the 410 axis of Gemini ascendant. The fourth house is the mother and the mother figure, and the 10th house is the house of career, but it can also show you the relationship with the father, while the 9th house shows you what you've learned from the father and from your teachers and from your gurus. So if you go and look at the fourth house of a Gemini ascendant, you see that there can be difficult karma with the mother or mother figure. Why? Well, look at the sign of Virgo. Virgo originally rules the 6th house of what I just told you what it means. So naturally, Virgo, the sign of Virgo, is going to bring some of the significations of the house that it originally rules into the 4th house. And because in the book from the astrologer Phaldippica, in that book, it is stated that the sign of the planet where it is Mutricone, that sign, that house, has like a little bit more of a predominance than the other sign. So Mercury, your ascendant lord, its exaltation in Mutricone sign is Virgo in the 4th house. So therefore, the 4th house is damn near just as important in karmic as your ascendant for Gemini ascendant. So we see that there's a big heavy karma when it comes to the mother figure, or your home life. So we see that maybe with the mother, well, naturally, well, since Mercury is exalted in the 4th house, we see that your intelligence, your communication can be greatly influenced by the mother. Your problem-solving capabilities can be greatly influenced and come from your mother or mother figure in your life. We see that your mom might be riddled with diseases. You might feel like a servant or a slave to your mom. You might feel so you got to use your intelligence to figure out how to handle and deal with your mother figure. Whether it's mental problems, health problems, or just whatever type of problem you feel that you got to exert a lot of your communication, a lot of your intelligence to resolving issues in regards to your mother or mother figure, with Virgo being in the 4th house of your chart. What else? And let's look at the 10th house. The 10th house is Pisces. Pisces originally rules the 12th house of loss, of isolation and all that stuff. Foreign things, faraway lands. So what could we see for a Gemini ascendant person? We could naturally see for the Gemini ascendant person that their father might not really be present in their life potentially. In some way, shape, or form, the relationship with the father might naturally be distant or non-existent with them because of Pisces being in the 10th house. And also with Pisces being in the 10th house for Gemini ascendant, we see that you can have an unstable career. Loss of career. Bouncing around in your career a lot could be something that is bouncing around in your career could be a theme for you if you are a Gemini ascendant. And what else? So you've seen all these proofs and facts of me supporting why these people would have a difficult karma with the parents. But then, to give you even more proof and evidence to support this, let's look at Mercury. Buddha, as he is known, B-U-D-H-A. He doesn't really have a relationship with his parents. To my knowledge, he doesn't have a relationship with the moon. He doesn't have a relationship with Jupiter, Brihaspati. Because I believe Brihaspati ends up cursing Mercury when he finds out that that kid is not his. Mercury is cursed to be like genderless. Yeah, Mercury is cursed to be like genderless. So, you got that. And I believe Mercury ends up running away from home. I didn't really see or even honestly look too much to see about anything about a relationship with Mercury and his mother Tara. But him running away from home, him not having a relationship with his stepfather or father, and seemingly not really much information about him and the mother, he doesn't really have no relationship or connection with the parents. So that 410 axis is sort of very karmic, and or you could say damaged for a Gemini ascendant person. Yeah, so now let's go in like chronological order since I just bounced around and shit. With you being a Gemini ascendant, the first house is the head. It's like from the eyebrows on up and the overall body in general. Your ascendant lord is Mercury. The Mercury ascendants, Gemini and Virgo, are associated with youthfulness. Because Mercury is sort of like a naive little innocent child. Because Mercury, mythologically, Mercury was cursed to be a eunuch. So, for one, Mercury was born to like be like sexually confused, or just be born with like two genders, or have like two sexual body parts or whatever. And then there's a tale of how Mercury ended up refusing the sexual advances of like a woman, and that woman ends up cursing Mercury to be a eunuch, eunuch. And from my little quick Googles, what the fuck a eunuch is, it's like somebody who's like almost like castrated, someone who like lost their sexual desire, someone who like castrated or whatever in a sense. So Mercury was like cursed to like lose its sexual desire too. So think about it. If you are like sexually or genderly whatever confused, and you've never had sex, you're a virgin, you don't really have no desire for sex, well then in a sense you're sort of innocent. You're sort of innocent, you're sort of pure, you're sort of naive. At least you are super like maybe innocent and pure and naive when it comes to like relationships. And the reason why maybe stereotypically a Gemini might be considered to be very friendly and all that stuff is because when they are sort of like making connections with somebody, they maybe, from at least from a mythological perspective, they might just want to genuinely speak to you, genuinely connect with you, but not in no sexual shit. You know, it's like their connections is like genuine. It's like, yeah, it's like their connections is like, I thought this shit had stopped recording. It's like their connections is like genuine. Their connections is like pure. So you see that innocence with them. And since I'm talking about this, let's just jump to the 7th house. The mutable ascendants are ascendants that naturally have difficult relationship karma. The 1st house is Gemini, ruled by Mercury. The 7th house is Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter. Now, what do you think is the relationship between Mercury and Jupiter, mythologically, based on what I told you? Not really good, is it? Mercury is not going to really want to listen to the 7th house. Mercury's not going to want to listen to the Sagittarius. Not going to want to listen to Jupiter. Jupiter, the 7th house, ended up cursing you. Ended up cursing Mercury to be like genderless and confused and all that good stuff. The 7th house is Sagittarius, who originally rules the 9th house of father's teachings and the guru's teachings and religions and belief system. So you, for a Gemini ascendant person, you'll naturally date and attract people who could be very educated, who might have a strong belief system, or they might treat you like a child, treat you like a student, and they'll be the teacher, treat you, or act like they're your father and just try to give you guidance and knowledge and wisdom and instill shit in you. And you might get pissed off with that. You might get fed up with that. You don't want to hear that. And that can cause the dysfunction within the marriage, within your relationships. Gemini doesn't want to listen to Jupiter. Doesn't want to listen to Sagittarius because of the mythological connection between the two planetary rulers of these two. But yes, with Gemini being in an ascendant, we see that the focus and focal point of your life is the natural significations of, the 3rd house, which is skills with your hands, which is communication, community, because the 3rd house is your immediate surroundings, your neighborhood, your friends, your neighbors, your siblings. So with Gemini ascendant, there's a focus around your life with community, with communication, with traveling, with working with your hands, maybe being brave and courageous, because the 3rd house is associated with efforts and bravery. All of those things: communication, siblings, community, friends, skills of your hands, social media. All of those things are of great focus with you as a Gemini ascendant. And you will have a youthful appearance, as I have already stated. So now we're going to jump to the second house, which is Cancer. Second house represents the family that you come from. Because the first house is you being born. And the second house is, the family that you come from. Who is taking care of you when you're born? Your family is taking care of you when you're born. The second house is wealth. But they are your wealth. They're providing for you after you're born. So the second house is like, your family that you're born from. That you're born into. The second house is your wealth. The second house is your mouth. The second house is also like your face, but it's from like the eyebrows to the throat. So it's your eyes, it's your throat, it's your lips, it's the face. And you got Cancer there. Cancer originally rules the fourth house of mother and mother figures, home, indoor environments. We can see that your mother or mother figure could have a huge impact on your finances, maybe. Your mother could have an impact on your finances, or your mother or mother figure could maybe have an impact when it comes to you, when it comes to your home life. When it comes to you maybe finding homes and properties and all that shit, your mother could have a prominent role to play in that shit. But what is exalted and what is debilitated in Cancer? Jupiter is exalted and Mars is debilitated in the sign of Cancer. So let's start with Mars. With Mars, if you imagine that Mars is debilitated in the second house of Cancer for Gemini ascendant, we might say that you might develop an aggressive speech, an aggressive or offensive way of communicating and talking. And you might specifically develop an aggressive speech and way of communicating and talking when it comes to maybe your mother or mother figure. You might burn and waste a lot of wealth, maybe, on the mother figure, maybe. This heavy karma with the mom is what I see in general for a Gemini ascendant. You might, you might not really be the best of managing or handling money with Mars there. I'm not really too sure. I'm just really focusing more so on the speech. And if we jump to the exalted Jupiter, we can say that your intelligence and your wisdom also comes from your mother, with Jupiter exalted in the second house for a Gemini ascendant. Maybe your knowledge on how to speak, maybe your knowledge on how to manage and handle money with Jupiter being exalted there, maybe that might also come from the mother, who knows. Maybe your family comes from a very educated background with Jupiter being exalted in the second house. Maybe the family comes from a very educated background. Maybe a very athletic background with Mars being there. Maybe you come from a background, maybe you come from a family that is very predominant with males. You probably grew up in a household with a lot of guys, maybe, because Jupiter and Mars are masculine planets. Who knows? That's what I gotta say for the second house. But let's move on to the third house. The third house is Leo. And I already sort of told you what the third house represents. It represents your communications, your written communications, what you're going to talk about, social media, short distance travels, your community, your neighbors, your siblings. That's what the third house is. So with Leo being there, Leo's a very dynamic sign. The whole sign of Leo is capable of doing a lot of things. I mentioned this in my manga video. I realized that Leo's a very diverse sign when you break down on the nakshatras in Leo. But ultimately, Leo is indefinitely a leadership sign. So with this leadership sign being in the third house, and Sun, Muchakon's sign being Leo, Sun, everything revolves around the Sun. Sun's like a natural karaka for father. It's a significator of father. So you can have a very confident way of speaking, which is supported by, that Mars being in the second house. You can have a confident, assertive, maybe aggressive way of speaking. An authoritative, commanding way of communicating and speaking with people could be seen maybe with Leo being in the third house. But I would say you could be maybe a very artistic or very creative individual with Leo being in the third house. because third from the third house is the fifth house. So the fifth house is the higher version of the third house. Leo is like the higher evolved form of Gemini. The third house is associated with social media and communication and skills with your hands, and the fifth house is associated with hobbies and stuff, and like artistic stuff too. So we see that, you know, Leo's like the higher evolved form of Gemini. So we can just see maybe a very, like I said, very demanding and leader, for authoritative and leadership capabilities and qualities when you communicate. And you can have a very artistic way of communicating, or very artistic and skillful with your hands. Very creative with the computer. Very creative with technology, maybe. With Leo in the third house. Since Leo originally rules the fifth house of children, potentially children could have a huge impact on your communication. When you have children, they might greatly impact you traveling and moving, maybe. Who knows? I'm just throwing shit against the wall. So let's go to the fourth house. Fourth house is Virgo. I already sort of lightly talked about this. But with the fourth house being Virgo, we see that Venus is debilitated. Mercury is exalted. I told you for Mercury, your intelligence can go towards resolving issues and problems with the mother and all that stuff, and mother figure. Or your intelligence and communication can go towards securing land and property and all that stuff, since that's what the fourth house is associated with. With Venus being debilitated, you can read it in a good way and a negative way. You gotta really look at someone's chart and see the planets and stuff, but just in a general sense, the people that you date and attract with Venus in the fourth house, debilitated in Virgo, you could probably see that your relationships with people could maybe could really revolve around the home. Like, for example, let's say that you don't have your own home, and the people that you date and attract, they don't have their own home. So you see that you not having your own spot and your partner not having your own spot could be an issue in your dating life. Or maybe you move people in, or maybe you move into people too quickly, move in with people too quickly, and that just causes dysfunction and harmony in the love life, maybe, with Venus being debilitated in the sign of Virgo. Maybe your mother or mother figure could negatively impact your love life or relationships with women, with Venus being in the fourth house. That's really sort of the things that I can sort of think and see with Venus debilitated in the fourth house of Cancer. Debilitated in the fourth house of Virgo. But Venus gains directional strength in the fourth house. And essentially, to my knowledge and understanding, planets with directional strength, when they are in the right Kendra houses that they belong to, is almost like, supposedly, no matter how negatively afflicted that planet is, it will eventually give good results in the future, because it's just placed in the house that it really belongs to. So maybe early on in your life you might struggle with getting a home that you want, maybe securing a roof over your head, maybe, who knows. But maybe eventually, as you get older, as time progresses, as Venus comes alive, you might get a house near the water. You might get a beautiful looking house or whatever. Securing home, securing property might be very important. The people that you date and attract, them having their own spot, maybe could be very important in your life, with Venus being in the fourth house debilitated. That's really all I gotta say for the fourth house. Like I said, your mom might have medical issues, intestinal, digestive issues, with Virgo originally ruling the sixth house. But like I said, we just ultimately see some heavy karma with the mother and mother figure, or land and property and home. Now we jump to the fifth house. The fifth house is Libra. As I have stated before in a few other recent videos, Libra, to me, in my opinion, is a sign of businessship, partnership. It's a business sign. When you look at all the nutcrackers in Libra, it sort of deals with bargaining, and negotiating, communicating, and mass communicating, working together with somebody, or going on and doing your own thing. That's what Libra is. It's a sign of business, because you got to communicate. You got to shake hands. You got to form alliances and get partnerships, you know? So Libra isn't just all romantic. It can be business too. But this sign is in the 5th house. Saturn is exalted in Libra, and Sun is debilitated in Libra in the 5th house. And the 5th house deals with your children. It deals with education. It deals with gambling and hobbies and dating. So it's a lot to say about the 5th house. With Saturn being exalted here, we can see that still there might be a delay of children. And with Sun being debilitated here, a delay of children. You might not have kids no time soon. If you go back to the ascendant being Gemini, and I told you how Mercury was cursed to just be like generally confused and like be cursed to have like a low sex drive, it makes sense why it might be a delay for you to have children. For Gemini or Virgo ascendant. For Virgo ascendant, your 5th house is Capricorn, where you have 2 malefics there. Essentially, where you have like, you know, the malefic Mars is exalted there for Virgo ascendant, and then you have Saturn, who rules the 5th house. So, but anyway, we'll get to that when I get to Virgo ascendants. But naturally, you see that difficult karma or delay of children for Gemini ascendant, because of the 2 fiery grahas, Sun and Saturn, having like some connection with the 5th house. Saturn is a sign of karma. Saturn is a sign of servants and slaves, servitude. Saturn isn't a leader. So we can see that maybe you can maybe be, I don't want to say like a slave, but your children might have you wrapped around their fingers. Because Sun debilitated in Libra, it's debilitated in Libra because Sun is like a king. Sun doesn't want to negotiate with people in Libra. He wants to demand shit. You're going to fucking do this, you're going to do this now. But in Libra, he got to be humble. He going to realize that being strong and authoritative in the dating world, when it comes to your children, and when it comes to teaching or learning, you can't be strong and authoritative. You got to be humble with those 5th house. And you got to be real humble. You can't be strong-arm and shit. That's what you'll learn with, you know, that Sun. And that's what you'll learn with Sun and the 5th house debilitated. With Saturn, like I said, you might serve your children. Or you might serve professions and careers in relation to children and education. You can have a heavy karma with children and education, maybe. You might serve the elderly, with Saturn representing the elderly. You might serve people in powerful positions of power, with Sun representing like kings and stuff. So you'll be a servant to the things of the 5th house of Libra being there. You'll be humble. And you'll be a servant. You'll have to submit. You have to be submissive, essentially. What else can I say about Libra in the 5th house? I want to make sure I'm not missing them, so I'm going to go quickly look at my notes. With Venus, Mutricone sign being Libra in the 5th house, you might meet a lot of your love interests within the 5th house environment. Such as, you know, environments related to children, environments related to education, environments related to gambling or networking or whatever. And that's where you might meet your spouse. I know that's real broad, but that's where you might meet them. Your spouse might be older than you, with Saturn being in the 5th house. They might be older. That's all I really got to say about the 5th house and in general. So now we're going to go jump to the 6th house, which I've already sort of mentioned and talked about early in this video, with Scorpio being there. We see a heavy karma with either you contracting a disease or you being like the healer of a great disease, maybe. Or maybe some heavy karma with pets, you know. Maybe a sexual disease. Some heavy karma sexually, since Scorpio originally rules the 8th house of the sexual organs. The 6th house is intestines. So maybe you might experience great trauma or transformation through your dietary habits, with you being a Gemini ascendant, with Scorpio being there. But Moon is debilitated in the sign of Scorpio. So we can see that mentally, your mind and your emotions You feel unease and unbalanced when it comes to the sixth house. You don't want to deal with your bills, your everyday routine responsibilities. You don't want to deal with the bills, with taking care of your pets, with taking care of your health. You don't want to feel like doing that stuff. You get stressed out when you have to deal with those sixth house things. You get stressed out. But you got to deal with it, unfortunately. But you be stressed out. What else? That's essentially it with the little broad things that can happen with the sixth house. So then you go to the seventh house, which I already talked about. Sagittarius there. Your partner could be behaving like your teacher or guru or father figure. They can want to instill knowledge and wisdom in you. And you might not want to hear that shit. You might not want to listen to them. Sagittarius originally rules the ninth house of long distance travel. Your partner, you might date and entrap long distance people. Your partner might travel a lot. He might speak to people in other countries or whatever a lot. Or across long distance around across the country a lot. But we can see a theme of distance and maybe like a more so of a student-teacher role with Sagittarius being in the seventh house, and that can cause disruption in harmony for the Gemini ascendant person. The Gemini, the Sagittarius person in the seventh house, they might be older and mature, and you are the Gemini person. You're the Mercurial person. You're the young, innocent, naive person. You might be young-minded. You might be too young-minded and immature and innocent and inexperienced for your partners, and they might not want to deal with you. They might be trying to, yo, you need to get your shit together. You don't want to listen to them. Who knows? This child and parent role, this student and teacher role can play out for the Gemini ascendant. So now, we're going to jump to the eighth house, which is Capricorn. The sign of Capricorn is associated with conquerors. When you break in all the nutritures in Capricorn, they all deal with like conquering some shit, in my opinion. So we see that with the eighth house being Capricorn, you want to conquer the things in relation to the eighth house. Or since Capricorn originally rules the 10th house of career, we can see a heavy karma with the career. We can see a lot of transformations and transitions and endings and trauma with your career. We can see that you might want to face and conquer the trials and tribulations and obstacles you'll face within your career. You might want to own that. You might want to conquer the issues that you might have with your in-laws and with your spouse, with how your spouse handle their wealth, because the eighth house is your in-laws and it's the spouse's wealth. So you might want to maybe conquer and face and tackle head on the trials and tribulations and obstacles in regards to your in-laws, to maybe how your spouse deals with and handles their money. Or you might just face a whole lot of obstacles and transformations and career-ending, traumatizing things in regards to your career, with Gemini being in the eighth house. With Capricorn being in the eighth house for the Gemini ascendant. Mars is exalted in Capricorn. Jupiter is debilitated in Capricorn. So with Mars being exalted in Capricorn, like I said, I feel as though that would just further heighten you wanting to maybe face head on, having the drive, having that fire within you to maybe want to face and deal with the obstacles that will probably be prominent within your career. You won't run away and will want to face and conquer maybe obstacles and issues with maybe your in-laws, maybe. And then you have Jupiter debilitated. I don't really know what to say with a debilitated Jupiter and Capricorn. You know, the eighth house is also mystical and occult-like. Maybe you will want to make sense of the mystical occult world. Maybe you want to try to break it down in a practical sense. Maybe make wealth off of it. Sneezed. Fuck that shit. Back to the fucking video. Jupiter debilitated in Capricorn. The wisdom of Jupiter is sort of tainted with it being in the earth sign Capricorn. It wants to maybe make a career out of the wisdom and knowledge that it has. It wants to probably market it, make money off of it. But I don't really know what to say for what Jupiter and Capricorn in the 8th house might do. To be honest, I'm just, showing you how you can sort of interpret these ascendants. And maybe you could find a better way to explain it than when I'm struggling to do it right now. But I honestly don't know. Maybe your father, since Capricorn originally is associated to 10th house, which is a house of father, and Jupiter can represent a guru, a father also. And Mars can represent a brother. Male figures in your father, they might be present in your life. You might seek counsel from them when it comes to dealing with your spouse. When it comes to dealing with issues with your spouse, when it comes to dealing with the issues with the in-laws, your father figure, brother figure, they might be there to maybe want to support you and back you up. Like, yo, if he giving you any problems, we'll jump this motherfucker. We'll beat his ass. Or if you're a guy who dealing with a girl, maybe they'll give you wisdom and advice with dealing with the women and shit. But who knows with this combination. You go look at the 9th house, Aquarius. Aquarius is co-ruled by Rahu. Aquarius rules the 11th house of large social network circles, organizations, and gains. We see that maybe with you being a Gemini ascendant, there could be a huge emphasis on you wanting to, you know, maybe make networking connections with intellectual people, with teachers, people that you can learn from. You want to learn about a variety of things with Aquarius in the 11th house. You might want to, I don't know, a lot of you, since the mutual cone of Aquarius is also Saturn, you could become a servant to the 9th house. Education could be very important. Networking with people who are very smart and intellectual could be very important for you. You might want to, you know, gather a lot of information about this, about that. A jack of all trades, a master of none. You might just be real interested in learning and gathering knowledge and communicating with it and just being real spontaneous and traveling and shit. Aquarius originally ruling the 11th house, and the 11th house being associated with eldest sibling. Eldest sibling might have a huge influence on your belief systems, on your political views, on your religious views, on your education. When it comes to you traveling, the elder sibling might have a great influence on those type of things. Maybe your father or father figure or teacher or guru or whatever didn't have time to really teach you and give you knowledge the way that they wanted to or that you needed it, because maybe they gave so much emphasis to teaching and raising communities and large masses of people with their knowledge and wisdom instead of you. Who knows how shit might play out with Aquarius in the 9th house. And then you jump to the 10th house, Pisces. I told you, the loss of career, transitions with career, multiple careers maybe, remote career, with you know, Pisces being there, originally ruling the 12th house. Mercury is debilitated here, and Venus is exalted here. So maybe you might find your love and romantic connections through your career, with Venus being exalted here in the 12th house, in the 10th house of Pisces. Mercury being debilitated in the 10th house, you might have abstract ways of thinking and communicating when it comes to your career. Your abstract ways of communicating and tackling problems within your career might cause dysfunctions and disharmony within your career or whatever. Who knows? But yes, just abstract ways of thinking and communicating can be seen with Mercury being debilitated in the 10th house for Mercury, in the 10th house of Pisces for Gemini ascendant. Like I said, you might have a remote career maybe. Who knows? So now we're going to jump to the 11th house, which is Aries. Mars is, I mean, not Mars. This is Mars' mutual sign, but Sun is exalted here. Sun is exalted in Aries. Sun and Saturn is debilitated in Aries. So, like I said, the 11th house deals with large social network circles, organizations, and gains. Aries is the head and the body. So we see that there will be a huge emphasis for your mind and for the body to want to be in large social network circles, organizations, and communities. You want to immerse yourself with the people. You want to network and learn with the people and stuff, you know. That's sort of short and simple. But with Sun being exalted in the 11th house, when it comes to working with groups and people, you could end up fucking up. Because you can be very selfish or egotistical and want to rule with a strong arm and hand. You could be maybe very selfish. You can have a hard time working together with people. integrating yourself with groups of people. You have the desire to, but with that exalted sun, you might go about it in the wrong way. You might not be too well with might not be that too good with network with people with sun being exalted in Aries in the 10th house. You might go about it in a wrong and aggressive and authoritative way. Saturn likes being in the 11th house, but it doesn't like being in Aries. So Saturn here, it might think that you're doing the right thing. You think you're going about things the right way and serving and networking with people, but you might be doing it in the wrong way. You might be doing it in a very selfish way, and it can end up hurting you. Yeah, that's essentially what I gotta say with Aries in the 11th house. Yeah. So now, finally, we're gonna jump to the 12th house. The 12th house is Taurus. Moon is exalted here, and this is Moon's Mutricone sign. The 12th house is foreign lands, isolated places, jails, hospital, rehabilitation centers, unfamiliar areas and environments, foreign countries, and it's also a house associated with hidden bed pleasures, because 6 from the 7th house is the 12th. So therefore we see that the 12th house is the issues of the 7th house. And since the 6th house is associated with servants and slaves, 6 from the 7th, which is the 12th, can be viewed as the mistresses, your hidden servants, your sexual servants. The 12th house can be the dysfunction of your marriage, of your partnerships, of your relationships. So, with Moon being exalted here, we see that maybe secretly the Gemini ascendant person can be very sexual, can be very lustful. Their mind can be geared toward having secretive, hidden sexual affairs and encounters. Their mind feels at ease when they're traveling or in solitude. When they get away from the 6th house, they don't want to deal with the bills and responsibilities. They want to get away from all that stress. They want to go somewhere isolated and chill out and relax. Yeah, they could just love to travel. The Moon in Taurus in the 12th house could love to travel. They could love to be isolated and be alone. They might make their gains because Taurus usually rules the 2nd house of the wealth and finances. You might make your wealth remotely. You might make your wealth from, helping people in faraway places, maybe. Who knows? But your mind feels stable in the 12th house environment and stuff. And that's essentially all I gotta say for Gemini ascendant. I'm gonna just look at my notes and make sure that I'm not missing nothing. But I basically hit the nail on the head for Gemini ascendant people. So I hope this gave you great insight and clarity on what to expect if you are a Gemini ascendant yourself. And like I said, I didn't say them again in the video. With the gems that I'm giving y'all with these secrets of the ascendants, you can basically take any planet that is in these signs, in the signs of Aries, Taurus, and Gemini, and you take that planet, you make it the ascendant or whatever. Everything I just told you about these ascendants, you now know in detail how that planet is going to behave. So if you got a planet in Gemini, you can say that, okay, if I make that planet that's in Gemini, who might be my 10th lord, my ascendant, I can be like, okay, these are the things that I deal with my career. Oh, I got Venus in Gemini. I know that everything that Jordan said, this will be what I deal with my love life. Oh, I got Moon in Gemini. Well, I know that in greater detail, this is how I will feel, and this is how I will think, and this is how I'll react to situations and things. So, with these videos, I don't even need to make videos of planets through signs. All you got to do is do the work yourself. Solve the equation yourself. Planet plus sign equals this. But see you when I make my next video.